And official ballots are now being printed as South Korea prepares for the snap presidential election next Tuesday. But questions over a possible conservative merger still linger. Let's turn to Professor Mason Richey for more. Good morning, Professor Richey.
Hi, good morning.
So the nation's election watchdog started printing the ballots out on Sunday, which means that even if there's a conservative merger, the Reform Party's Jun-seok's name is there on the paper, but under the term resignation. Now, at that point, a merger wouldn't be as meaningful, would it?
Yeah, that's right. Whenever this type of thing happens at the last minute, the fact is, there is always the possibility of ballot confusion, especially among, older people who perhaps don't follow politics particularly closely. So indeed, mathematically, this is almost certain to hurt the Conservative Party if the merger were to happen, at least in some small way, because of ballot confusion. Whether or not it really makes much of a material difference, of course, is a second question. The other thing, of course, really is more the sort of spirit of that merger. And I think that there's a decent argument to be made that if a merger were to come about at this point, it might simply indicate that conservative unity has been too little and come too late, especially after all of the acrimony over the Han Duck-soo, Kim Moon-soo merger possibility, the way that shook out. And then, finally, there's also the question of whether or not Lee Jun-seok voters under a merger situation would go 1-to-1 for Kim Moon-soo, which is not necessarily guaranteed either. And some of the polling data indicates that's not the case. Most of his supporters are indeed conservative, but some of them skew differently in terms of their attachments, in terms of political ideology, and might not support Kim Moon-soo 100%.
Well, I do have to mention a second and final window closes this Wednesday, though, the eve of early voting. I know the merger, a possible merger, seems highly unlikely at this point, but if it does happen, in what shape or form do you think?
Yeah, it's either going to happen or it's not. The chances are 50-50. And, I really think, if you're Lee Jun-seok, obviously you have all the cards in this respect. Kim Moon-soo, clearly wants the merger to happen for obvious reasons. And Lee Jun-seok has held out for a lot of different reasons. Some of them, I think, go back to in fact, much of it perhaps even goes back to the acrimony over his being forced out of party leadership earlier by the old party elephants. The accusations of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, and the way that resulted in party suspension, and essentially the sense that Lee Jun-seok was sort of forced out of the party in some sense. That's clearly left some scars. And then more pragmatically, if you're Lee Jun-seok, you're going to ask yourself the question of, what do you get? What type of influence do you get in a Kim Moon-soo government, for instance? So what type of influence do your political allies get? Put differently, the question that Lee Jun-seok has to ask himself is, how would a merger help him for the future? Right? He's still young. He's still a future conservative flag bearer, and in that sense, he wants, I think, to set himself up for the future as much as he does for right now. And I would argue that given the situation that we're in now, probably the best political calculus for him, I'm thinking, at least in terms of what he thinks, is that he stays in the race. He gets to argue that he has principles. He doesn't attach himself to the old guard in the Conservative Party, in the PPP. And he sets himself up also to see what type of sort of floor of support he would have through actually going through the election. And that would give him some information about what his political future would be in future presidential elections.
Definitely. He is a young contender, youngest contender out of the all runners. Professor Richey, we have to talk about the second presidential TV debate last Friday. Now, how constructive do you think that the debate was this time?
Not very. It wasn't a very good debate. There were a lot of personal attacks. There was a lot of mudslinging. It's not just in Korea. This happens all over. This happens in the United States. This happens in Europe. I increasingly question really how valuable these debates are, to be honest with you. They were supposed to debate about social welfare related issues, but honestly, they didn't talk about that nearly as much as they probably should have. It was really only in the back half of the debate. Lee Jae-myung spent a good portion of the debate essentially continuing to make the election a referendum on democracy, where he thinks he has stronger cards to play because of the martial law incident and former President Yoon's removal from power. He did eventually come around to talk about some other things like working hours and better corporate regulation and a sort of quote unquote fairer economic system in Korea. Kim Moon-soo spent a lot of time talking about how Lee Jae-myung is not trustworthy, calling attention to his scandals and his lawsuits, essentially calling Lee Jae-myung a corrupt radical. He did, of course, talk about some economic issues as well, notably, for instance, pension reform. And then Lee Jun-seok basically spent most of his time attacking both parties. Essentially said that the conservatives do have the martial law stain attached to them, and there's nothing they can do to get that out, while also blaming the Democratic Party for radicalizing politics in Korea and essentially being jointly responsible. So there was a lot of mudslinging, a lot of personal attacks, and not a lot of substance about policy going forward.
What usually happens in all presidential debates across the globe. Now, the next 8 days will be crucial for all runners. Now, how do you think the Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung, who is showing a strong lead, will spend the coming week?
Yeah, so I think in the first place, he's going to continue to hammer home what he considers to be, his huge advantage, and I think he's right analytically about that, and that is essentially making this election a referendum about the December 3rd martial law. He'll of course add to that. We've seen him, tacking to the middle and trying to make himself and his party come across as moderate, pragmatic, whether that be about domestic issues in Korea, for instance, tax reform. Or whether that be foreign policy, where, for instance, Lee Jae-myung's tried to say the right things, for instance, about continuing the alliance with the United States and even in a trilateral context with Japan. So he'll talk about those things. And then, Kim Moon-soo, we'll see him, continue to hammer away at Lee Jae-myung as being corrupt. We'll see him, obviously, behind the scenes try to put this merger together, which, of course, is really a sine qua non for his ability to win this election. We'll see him continue to try to make himself look like a moderate conservative also. He'll continue to draw attention to his labor activist background. He'll continue to talk in terms of foreign policy about reliance on the alliance with the United States, notably with respect to trade, in addition to the obvious security issues. And then Lee Jun-seok, I imagine, is going to spend as much time as anything else in one way or another trying to set up his political future, so much as he is trying to influence this particular presidential campaign.
All right, Professor Richey, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Great, thank you. You as well.